Welcome to part 4 of Managing Across Diverse Populations. Again, my name is Linda Dunn Jensen. I'm a faculty member here at the Kelley School of Business. Today I'm delighted to have 3 current students at the Kelley School to talk a little bit about their experiences. I have Pushpa Garg on the end here, who is actually from India. I have Eduardo Jurado, who is from Mexico. And then John Carroll, who's actually from New York, but has also traveled overseas in Hong Kong and I believe also in France. So today they're going to give us some flavor of their experiences both coming to the US from our colleagues on the end here and then also going abroad. So with that, I'd like to hand over first to Pushpa here, and if you could just give us a little introduction about yourself and just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you've learned so far.
Thank you, Linda. My name is Khushbu. Linda is right, I come from India, but I'm so fortunate to have traveled outside. I've been to several countries in Europe, have worked there for nearly 4 years, and then I decided to come to business school, and that's why I came to the US. So I've kind of had a chance to work in a country like Belgium and then come over to US, which is completely different from what Europe is. So I'm looking forward to sharing my experiences.
Thanks, great. Eduardo?
Well, I'm Eduardo Herrera. I'm from Mexico. I've also been traveling for some time. I've worked in the US before, some projects in Europe, but just like during school. And I'm very happy to be here. It's very interesting for me to, be here in the US as a student, a totally different experience, and really be able to show what Latin America is all about.
Great, thank you. And John?
My name is John Carroll. I actually spent last semester in Hong Kong and had the opportunity to not only study there, but to also work kind of with several groups doing not only disaster relief initiatives and setting up some programs kind of in the wake of the earthquake in Japan, but also kind of get course experience and teamwork experience on everyday projects and truly immerse myself in the culture.
Great, well thank you. Thanks for those brief introductions. So I thought we'd start first, and the primary part of this series has really been to getting people to kind of understand what it's like to work across different cultures. And some of that would be enhanced greatly if you could tell us a little bit about your experiences, maybe either the first time you experienced a new culture or some of the things that kind of surprised you when you came to a new culture. If you could, we'll talk a little bit about that first, if you want to start.
So, when I stepped out of the country, of my own country, it was the first time I was going out, so I was very scared. Mm-hmm. A couple of things which I loved about Europe when I went there was the politeness that people had in their language. So I did not speak the local language, and Europe is all about speaking a local language. And they gave me the time to adjust in their culture and understand what they're trying to communicate to me, because English is not a mandatory language for any of the countries in Europe. So for me, that was an eye-opener, that language can be a big communicator and you don't have to be masters in that language. If you can put an effort to try and show them that you're learning what their life is all about, they appreciate it and they'll help you adjust there. The other one was I found that the European culture was very big on work-life balance, which for me was a great thing, which I did not experience in India because of the kind of hardships we go through in India in terms of its extended work hours and things like that. So I really appreciated that in the culture. The only advice I have for students when they go outside or as professionals, give yourself time to learn about the culture. Don't be put off in the first 2 days when you see things are just not working out. So give it time, because every culture is so different. And in this whole process, adapt yourself and don't just change yourself. So adapting and coaching yourself is kind of the key, and giving yourself patience and time.
Great, thank you. Eduardo, how about
Building
yourself?
On that experience, my first experience, as a student, I was enrolled in an internship program in the US. So my experience was basically US students, most of them from the West Coast, in the East Coast. That was also different for them, being from the same country but different areas. So it was very interesting to see how they had to adapt inside their own country. Mm-hmm. And for me, it was kind of easy because I come from Mexico City. It's a big city, and Washington D.C. it's more like the center of cities. It wasn't that hard. But the interesting part was that people were really anxious to know more about Mexico and how the way of life down there. People know about the food, but that's all about they know and what they see on the news. It was fun to be able to teach them more about how business done in Mexico, how school, how party, how life in general is very similar in many ways to the US, but also very, very different. There's some cultural aspects that are very different. That was very important to show them. And also, as Khushbu said, the work-life balance, sometimes it can be similar, but depending on the industry you're in. So it's more like the same thing in the US, but it's not. So we're like cousins, like distant cousins. And one of my main advice is if you're gonna go abroad, at least give some time, as Khushbu said, to get to know the country, the culture, the people you're gonna work with, and also try everything. Try the food, go out, explore, because you can be really amazed of how much you can really learn from just going out and talk to strangers and really, force yourself to, if I don't speak the language, at least go practice and make an effort, as Khushbu said, because they will really appreciate that. And they will also be interested in your side of the story.
Great. And John?
Well, before I went to Hong Kong, I did a lot of research. I tried to read a lot of blogs, a lot of just informational websites to find out kind of anything and everything I could. But having kind of landed there and being immersed in the culture, it does not prepare you fully. And the only way that you can actually prepare yourself is to have a very open mind. And as Eduardo was saying, it really is a cultural exchange. It's this exchange of kind of your culture and their culture and kind of finding somewhere in the middle where you can coexist happily. And for me, one of the most surprising things about Hong Kong, and especially the Asian culture, was the way that conflict was managed and mitigated. It's very roundabout compared to, I guess, in the United States, where we're typically a lot more direct. I oftentimes found myself hearing information from secondary or even tertiary resources about something I did that my roommate, for instance, wasn't particularly thrilled about. And ultimately, kind of, we figured out this balance, and we figured out this way that I respected his culture and I could understand kind of where he was coming from when he was trying to communicate different things to me. But also, he understood where I was coming from and how atypical it would be to find kind of information about yourself from somebody you didn't necessarily know, kind of knew about you or knew you even existed.
Great. Well, it sounds like you've all kind of learned to navigate your way through on the culture side. Can you talk a little bit about your experiences on the work side as far as maybe some of the challenges you have working? I know for you coming here specifically to the US and working with a lot of domestic American students, and then also doing internships in the US where you now have to kind of adapt not only from a school perspective but also a workplace perspective, and then we'll get to you, John.
So one of the experiences that I remember here is simple as using an Outlook calendar. We don't do it in India. We just don't. So it's about valuing people's time. When I went on to my internship, I was supposed to do 50 meetings in 2 weeks of time, and I could not have done it if I weren't organized and if I kind of didn't adapt my style of working to what the American style of working was. And it didn't harm me in any way, because it kind of helps me in school as well, that use a calendar if you want to have a meeting with someone. So that was the concept of time management. In the work-life side is very different in Asia and India, where I come from, and in the US. So that was, for me, was a starking difference that I found. The second thing was, when you're standing in front of someone and you're trying to make a point, you don't have to go about the bush, like he said. People like if you're direct, but at the same time, it's very important to be respectful to the other side. People here don't like if you're very aggressive as you present, so I had to mold that part of me. My voice can come across as very gruff, so I had to create different kinds of tones in my voice as I speak, just so I'm able to communicate my point in a more humble way, but still able to get it across. So if I'm asked to speak for 2 minutes, it means I have to stop after 2 minutes. So that was very important for me, because working as a leader in the American environment is very different from working as a leader in, it's not as hierarchical as it is in India. As a manager, you're accountable for what you've been assigned. And in India, it's very different. It's like you try to do a lot of things which you're not even assigned, and you just try to waste a lot of your time. So time management and being polite but direct at the same time are two things that I've inculcated in the way I work.
Great, thank you.
One of the main things I saw is, we're very similar, in Mexico and the US, because basically we're neighbors, no? But it's a big difference, as Khushbu said, time management. In Mexico, if you say 10 o'clock, it may be 10:30, 11. It's not 10 o'clock. And in the US, if you say 10 o'clock, it's 9:55. So at the beginning, you're like, okay, I have a meeting. It's 10 o'clock already. You're late. And you're always the last one. And we have that, brand that, wait, we're always late. The Mexicans are always late. And, well, it's cultural. We like to take our time. So that was the first part of really managing your time, saying, okay, I have to be respectful of their time because I'm the one from the outside, so I have to be the one who adapts, not them to me. In the middle, you find, as you say, I mean, like a common ground, and you start. But once you know them, you can do that. But in the beginning, you have to be very respectful of their time and the customs of the culture you're in. And also, I mean, in Mexico, it's very different because people are more focused on relationships than not just getting things done. Mm-hmm. So you go to the office and you talk to people, say hi. So by the time you get to the office and go to your seat, you talk to 20 people. So you get a cup of coffee and talk about the family and the friends and the weekend and everything except the work. So over here, it's like you get to the office, you get to work, and you get to work from minute 1 till 5 o'clock. And then you check out and go home or do whatever you want. So they're like really like that relationship building, and some people are more open, others are more like, I just want to work and get out of here. I have lunch in my place, don't even bother me. So like, hey, can I have lunch together? Because I'm used to having people sit down and have lunch. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, I want to eat alone. So that's interesting to see, culturally how that works. But on the business side, a lot of things are similar, but it's also like we tend to procrastinate more than in the US. So it takes time to adapt for them and for us.
Right. And I think you're bringing out a good point, which is there's 2 cultures here, or multiple cultures, so that even if I'm traveling abroad, I bring my culture of who I am, but I have to figure out what kind of culture I'm going into, and that's some of the topics I covered earlier in the series, but you guys are giving us a nice flavor to how that actually works in the world. And how about you, John?
Well, actually going to Hong Kong, one of the main kind of drivers of business is called guanji, and it's your family and their sphere of influence, but also who they're connected to and who exists within that sphere, and who they're able to influence. So when I was organizing a kind of disaster relief event, as I said, post-earthquake in Japan, it was really difficult to go into businesses and try to contact them and get their support as a kind of international student and as a foreigner, because I had no sphere of influence there. I had no network that I was able to leverage. But when I organized my team and when I was leading this team of students kind of in this initiative, it was very able and easily kind of recognizable that this was a great task for kind of the local students who would have that sphere of influence, whose parents may or may not know the owner of these businesses. And when sending them in, we got a company to to match our donation 7 times over. Wow. And it's largely because of the fact that their parents knew each other, or it's this kind of give and take of favors, or whatever it may be. And that was really how I was able to leverage that diversity, but also kind of that guanji, even though I myself didn't necessarily have it.
Right. So do you actually build that with the student, or is it strictly family?
I think it's actually a combination of both your personal and your professional network, mm-hmm. And largely they're oftentimes very interrelated because a lot of the businesses within Hong Kong and within China as well are family owned and family oriented. So it's this network that is constantly expanding as you make new business contacts and as you meet new professionals, as well as on the personal side as you meet new people and even as you marry or kind of expand your personal network as well.
Great, thanks.
There's just one point, Linda, I also wanted to add was the concept of networking. Mm-hmm. Just does not exist in India. So in India, whether it is for you to get a job or it is if you want to close a business deal, you don't need to wine and dine with people as much as you have to do it here or in Europe. So mm-hmm. that was the thing that I would advise anybody going to the Asian side, see that it's not that common to see people going out for a beer together. That doesn't happen in that culture. So for me, that was an eye-opener where I had to kind of consciously train myself to talk more to recruiters when they come in here. They're not going to come to me. I need to go to them. So that was like a very big difference. But I think it's a great thing because you become more responsible and you realize everything in life is not so easy. So there was a great thing that came out of networking and wining and dining. It just makes you more professional, more smart, more prepared for the world. It's not easy to just get that automatically or naturally. It took a lot of time for me to consciously develop that in me.
Right, I think you bring a good point, which is some of the things that we do in our own culture, we think either other cultures do it, or if they don't do it, having to build those skills
yes.
are different.
Yes.
And I don't know, Eduardo, if you had an example of that where someone might come to Mexico and experience something slightly different than maybe in the US.
Well, touching the point of networking, it's very similar. although it's not as formal as, oh, I just go there, elevator pitch, 2 minutes and get out. It's more like, hey, we get to know each other, let's go out. You take your time to know the person and then talk about business.
Okay.
So you first build a relationship and then you want to talk anything business you want. But first you have to either go out, eat, drink, whatever, or at least walk around the block and then talk about business. And for a while, not just like 2 minutes, elevator pitch and I'm done and say hi to the next person. It's more like take your time, build a relationship. And it's interesting to see how many people from the outside come to Mexico and are very surprised of how much we know from each other. I mean, I know my friends' family and their second cousins and third cousins and fourth cousins because we all get along and we like that. And it's both personally and professionally. So it's a very close-knit, kind of like in Asia. It really helps you build, business relationships and also personal relationships. So it's not just like for the business side or for the personal side. It's more like a mix of everything. And you're part of that circle and you're in the circle of trust.
Yeah.
All right, great. So I think we'll start to wrap it up a little bit, but if you can think about advice or, that one nugget where somebody who is either going to, do work abroad or go study abroad, in a different country, even travel, like what would you say, oh, make sure you do this? I mean, and I know you talk about research, but really, what's that one thing that either you had an experience where you're like, oh, I wish I had known that before I stepped into that or did something? I don't know if you could think of like that one key takeaway.
So I've had, it hasn't happened to me, but I've seen it happen to a lot of friends and colleagues where you try way too hard to learn a new culture. I think it's important that you don't lose yourself in this whole process of learning what an American culture is all about or what the European culture is all about. Let it happen naturally to you. Because if it's going to be forceful, you're not going to like it. And if you're not going to like it, you're not going to wanting to stay in that place. So it's important that you understand that you're not losing your roots. You're just learning something new. So I sounded as European, as Indian I would to somebody in Europe. And when I'm here, my American friends say, oh, you're just like one of us. So that's kind of the point you want to reach to. So don't force a culture on yourself. Like it. And that's how it's going to be very natural to you. You're going to enjoy it.
Great, that's great advice. And how about you, Eduardo?
I would say just keep a very open mind. I mean, as I mentioned before, go out, try the local food, try to get out of your comfort zone. People might try it a bit slowly or might go faster, but slowly try to build on that and try a new place tomorrow and talk to somebody else, meet new people, go to museums, go to different places, try to walk around the city or the place you're going to be, because that'll really give you the flavor about the culture and the place you're in. And it will help you understand more about the culture. And if you read a web page or read a book, because you can have a nice point of view, but it'll be somebody else's point of view. You're going to build your own point of view and not losing yourself. And you're going to be, okay, I'm a Latin American citizen, so I bring this to the table. How can I adapt this in this culture? Or how can this be really similar? Because we really understand sometimes there's a lot of similarities between cultures, but they're not very evident. They're like more like you have to dig deep to find them.
Great. And John?
In addition to being kind of keeping an open mind, I found it really important to, I guess, know what I was going to miss or have something that I could always go back to that reminded me of home and really brought me back. And in Hong Kong, that was this one restaurant that served this great American breakfast. I mean, it was this absolutely massive spread, pancakes and eggs and bacon and whatnot. But anytime I was kind of feeling, I guess, oversaturated by the culture, just getting to the point that, I mean, it was almost overwhelming. I would just kind of take a break, kind of take some time out of my day and, go and get this breakfast at this place. And I think it's important to kind of have that resource or have a network of people that you can relate to and that come from a similar background to you in that culture, while also maintaining a group of kind of friends from that culture as well.
Right, and I think that is really a great takeaway, is how you learn the culture, how you adapt to the culture, but I think you all pointed out really important things, which is to kind of maintain that piece of who you are and not push it so much, but be willing to be adventurous and try something. And I think your story in particular brought something for me, is that I know a lot of times if I've traveled in countries that are very different than the US, I tend to stay in a more westernized hotel for that very reason. It's just that, a little bit of grounding also goes a long way. Sure. So I thank you so much for your time, and I think you really hopefully enriched the audience as much as you've enriched my our discussion today as far as what I've been able to take away. I always like to travel, and I certainly have some good pointers from you all, so I really appreciate your time today. Thanks.
Thank you for bringing us here.